to my studio. This is Emma, and a very warm welcome if it's your very first time here. It's lovely to have you all here. I wish you were all in my studio, but you're not. So there we go. This is the next best thing. I think the internet is this incredible thing. You know, when I think back down the years, before the internet, before computers, what did we all do with ourselves? I don't know. I really genuinely don't know. So anyway, I think this is fantastic because I can connect with you from my little corner of Cumbria and bring a bit of fun, fabric fun to you wherever you are in the world. It's just great. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Do leave me a thumbs up if you enjoy the video, because that really helps, I think, people to find us, and then we can spread the word that there's something fun going on here in my little place of happiness. Last week, as if you were here, I started off a new landscape and I played with those fabrics and I fiddled with those fabrics, and what I started out with was sort of these kind of shades. Yeah, if you watched it last week, I started off with sort of palish shades with a bit of nice silvery grey, and by the end, by the time I'd finished fiddling with it, it sort of turned into these colours to go with the pretty silver colour here, this shiny colour. So it was literally, I had no idea what I was going to create. I knew I'd been sort of chosen these fabrics for a reason, but the fact that I'd chosen these and then I didn't use them, I thought was so interesting to me. That was just a very interesting process, and it just shows you the importance of just playing with things until something inside you just goes click. It's just like, oh yes, and it fills you with sort of a sense of, you know, all's right with the world. I don't know what it is, it's just lovely, and it just suddenly goes into that, it sort of slides into something nice, and it's just what you want it to be, and I don't know, it's just extraordinary, an extraordinary process. So today I'm going to get on with some threads, get some sewing done, and that's going to be lovely to get on with. I've got to cut some more pieces out. I'm not quite there with the composition of this. That sounds like very, very posh word, composition. I'm not quite sure exactly what's going into the picture next, but I think it's going to be this dark purple as the mountainy bit, and I'll probably have to recut this piece as well because I had a piece of this across the top. But you know, hey, it's evolved. It's like life. Life is an evolution. It's just, you know, things come up for you to deal with, and you deal with them in the moment. And in that moment, I think the fact that you start playing means that something magical happens, a process happens, and it takes you on this sort of path of exploring. And it's curiosity. It's saying, well, what if I put that with that? What if that colour went there? What if I move that piece there? And I think the same, honestly, the same has been happening in my life. I keep asking questions and things get moved around, and I think, well, what if I did this in a different way? What if I went and did such and such instead of and do it in a different way to the way I would normally do it? And I think things are just shifting all the time for us here on planet Earth in a complicated way maybe, but it is going to take us somewhere really brilliant, like making this picture. So anyway, that's just an aside. That's just me chatting to you and saying, what's next? I have to go and actually cut this fabric and make it happen, because if I don't show up and I don't make it happen, nothing's going to happen, is it? So let's get on with it and see what happens. Okay, so here we go. I've got my picture laid out here. I have cut pieces of fabric that are now the right size for it, because last week I was just sort of cutting and seeing what happened. So I've got this nice sort of purpley colour underneath this lovely lace, and I've got 2 layers underneath here. I've got this lovely silvery organza-y fabric, which is adding extra light to the silver underneath. And the piece underneath is like a lining fabric, I think, and I've laid out this piece of purple. Now this piece of purple looks a bit coggly, and I did try and iron it, but if I iron this fabric, it just goes a very funny colour. So I haven't ironed this, and I'm hoping it'll just go fine once I stitch it. I've pinned this edge down so that I could see where my edge was for working out how big this needed to be. But I think I'm going to take this off and I'm going to stitch that on last, because I want to do whatever lines I do on here, I want to go behind that purple piece. So I'm just basically going to pin these bits together so that it all holds in place. If you didn't watch this last week, underneath here I've got a piece of, oh, in fact it hasn't pinned through to that, I've got a piece of tearaway stabiliser. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? It's a tearaway. It's really reckless, but it's really essential because it'll stop the sewing machine sort of eating all the other fabrics. And then this is a piece of curtain interlining, which I use as sort of wadding, and it helps to make a sort of a quilty effect. It gives a bit of texture to the top. So I'm going to just pin these on. It's been a very interesting process, as I said in my introduction. It's been an interesting process doing this piece because it started out so differently. And it's just changed and changed until a point where I've gone, oh yes, that's how I want it to be. So this, as I say, was cut several times before I got it to that sort of long, simple shape. And it's just play with your fabrics until you get to the point. I'll have to do this again. Here we go. I need to put that actually properly over there. Make sure it's all lined up. And, you know, you just keep playing until you go, oh yes, that's how I want it to be, and then you stop and you get on with it. Otherwise you'll just play all day, which is nothing wrong with playing all day. I'm quite happy to do that sometimes. Just got to make sure this is really catching on the back of there. I do quite like the process of pinning. Gives a sense of security to what you're doing, because otherwise it can all just shift and slide. Actually, that doesn't need to move up there because the purple's going to cover it. It's all about working out, with a picture like this, it's working out what layer goes underneath what bits you're actually going to see. So I mean, that edge isn't going to be seen because the purple piece is going to go right across the top of that. But I need to make sure the top edges are as straight as I can get them. And then I'll need to turn my sides in, but I think I need to trim some of the fabric off the edges. I made sure that everything was big enough to be able to turn the fabric underneath my edges, because my edges are all going to be turned in like that. It's going to be quite neat and tidy, this one. And obviously if you want to leave your edges rough and raw and go for it like that, that is absolutely fine. It's all about personal taste. It's what your eye sees, what pleases you, what gives you the pleasure of doing it. And there'll be 1,000 million ways to do it, and 1,000 million ways to actually stitch this. Oops, I'm just trying to get through all the layers here. And as I stitch, I will then work towards turning the edges underneath. I'm not going to pin it all in place now because often as you stitch, I'm sure you know, your fabrics move, don't they? And they shift. So I tend to work sort of centre outwards, or I'll work top down and then let the fabrics move down with the stitching, so you don't end up with a big sort of buckled up bit, like when you catch your skirt in the back of your knickers or something. You don't want to end up with a big ruckled bit anyway. Right, I need to pin this middle bit, I think, just so that it's all held in place. I'm going to trim these edges off as well, because you can see there's quite a bit, too much fabric there. I reckon to have about that much there. That's about what, ½ an inch or something, 3/4 of an inch, a couple of centimetres, whatever you know you work in. That's a bit too big. So I'll trim those down, those little edges, and then I will get it stitched. And that's the fun bit, isn't it? Okay, so I'm set up for free machine embroidery. Now you will notice, those of you who watched me for a while, this is not my usual machine, okay? This has got a very small foot on it. I'm just sort of getting used to this. This is my Bernina, and she works very differently to my usual Pfaff machine, which is a very old Pfaff. I've had them both a long time actually, but my Pfaff I have used and used and used, and I'm very used to her, and I know exactly how she works, and she's kind of a bit gentle. She's a very gentle machine. She's a bit like me. So my Bernina is much more businesslike somehow to me. I decided the other day I was actually a little bit scared of her. She was kind of, because her engine goes quite fast really, and she sounds a different sound to my Pfaff. So but no, she's okay. It's just partly also because I've got this very tiny foot on, which again, the foot on my Pfaff is much bigger. It's about, I don't know, ½ an inch across. So I just have to be slow and gentle with her, and me too. And we'll just start over here and we'll see what happens. It's very experimental. Everything I do, everything I stitch, it's just me playing around and seeing what happens, okay? So we'll see what happens, huh? Oh, I'll tell you what, the other thing I have to do is always very helpful if you switch your machine on, isn't it, eh? Now she's going to go like that, you see. There we go. So we'll see how it goes, huh? I've actually done a lot of stitching with her over this last week, but I've been doing some things which were just very free and didn't matter, you know? Because I was doing a lot of just wiggly waggly machining. And this has got to be a little bit more carefully done. It's also getting used to the speed that she goes at and how fast I go, because obviously the faster you go, the smaller your stitches, depending on how fast you move your fabric, of course, as well. It's all a ratio. So if you're new to free machine embroidery, don't worry, you know, just give it a go and be like me and experiment, and don't worry. So I'm just going into the corner here. You can see I've folded the fabrics underneath into a nice little square. And I'm just going to come right to the edge and then go back again. It's a bit like doing quilting. If any of you've done quilting, it's allowing the fabric just to puff up a little bit. I'm not really in charge of anything. I'm just letting the machine stitch and I'm moving the fabric. So down at this edge here, it doesn't really matter what I do because this whole area is going to be covered over by the purpley mountain. But I am making sure as I go along that I'm taking in the slack of the fabric so that nothing is getting too puffed up by my stitching. It's a slow process, this. I really enjoy doing this kind of thing because it's just a slow and gentle process and it's allowing the piece to evolve, really. I haven't got a set idea of how I'm doing it. I'm just letting the stitching happen and then seeing what I want to do as I go along. I'm just trying to get these little edgy bits under. Now I've got to this point. I didn't want to put them in under before because I didn't want anything to be too tight. Okay, so I'm just going to stop that there a moment and I'm just going to have a little look at what I've done so far. Okay, so that's looking okay, because by the time I put a purple mountain on top of there, there's not going to be much of that actually showing. I might do a little bit more stitching here where it's kind of a little bit gappy. I might pop something else in there. I might do a second colour. I don't know. I'm just playing around and seeing what happens. Probably need to do this edge actually. I think we'll do this edge next. So I'm just going over a few lines now. I've got it all held in place and I've had to stitch over the silver bit because that was a bit of a gap there, but that's okay. I've stitched over both bits and they're going to be hidden behind the purple mountain, lucky old purple mountain. And I'm just going over this a little bit more because I've realised I've got quite a similar sort of edge going on here, which I don't really want. I want to sort of break that up a little bit. And it's much easier once you've got it sort of held in place with your stitching and you can go back over and just add a bit more in. It's like disguising it. That's why I always say if you're going to do a single line, don't do more than one line because it really does take the eye away from, you know, if you think your line is really, really wobbly and not very good, say if you're drawing something, if you're trying to do an outline of something, you know, do a second line, do a third line even, you know. Because the more stitching you put on, the more it just sort of disguises the wobbles. And it also depends on how much of the fabric you want to see and how much of your stitching. Okay, so what I've done is I've just brought this to have a little look at the top there, and you can see I've got a fair amount of stitching, and that's holding it together. If I show you on the back, you can see possibly better. They're just little waggly lines, and then some more waggly lines on top, so that's not difficult to do. Once you get your first bit of stitching in place, it holds it in place, and it makes it much easier to do anything else you add on afterwards. So here I'm just checking that this is still looking okay, and that the stitching I've done behind, you see a lot of it's disappearing anyway, but you get the effect that it's behind this bit of mountain, so this will get stitched on towards the end of this portion of the stitching anyway. So I'm just going to put that out of the way for a moment, and I just wanted to show you I've collected up some silvery threads, because one silver is very different to another silver. This is sort of like a metallic thread, these little funny little spools here. That's yeah, it's a metallic one. This one is a rayon, I think, or a viscose. No, it's viscose, and it's just shiny without the sort of the edgy quality. That's quite edgy, that shine, but I quite like it. And then there's different shades, you see, of the different kinds. Those two are just the viscose ones, which I don't think are shiny enough, so I'm not going to use those. But I think one of these will do. And you see some of them look quite yellowy when you kind of put it up to here. It almost looks goldy. And then that one looks quite grey. This one's got a weird sort of metallicness to it. It's kind of, I don't really like that one, so we won't use that one. Let's not use that one. I think that's too grey. I usually check my threads by just pulling them out like that, and I just look at them, and if I've got a choice of a 2 or 3, I put them out and then I just go, oh actually no, that's the one to use. So I think we're going to use this one. I think it's quite subtle. This one's a bit too, is that too metallic-y? Actually no, I'm thinking actually that one's better actually. I think we'll go with this one. Change my mind. It's my prerogative to change my mind. That's no good. That's Larry. That one's Larry. Yes, so I'm going to go with this one. So I'll get it over to my machine, but I will show you first a little tip. A very good friend showed me this. You put, if it's a metallic thread and you're worried about it snapping or snarling itself up, I do this. My friend said put it in a cup behind your sewing machine, and I then put that bit round where the thread would normally sit, so it has a little bit of an anchor, and then I thread it up as normal, but that just allows the thread to really unravel as it wants to unravel, and then there's no pulling and less snapping. I find it really helpful, that one. So that's my little hot tip. I just happen to have this rather nice mug that I use. Isn't that nice? Okay, so it's so much easier to handle this now. It's got a bit of stitching on, and we're just going to come along here and get started. Put my presser foot down. So when I get to this edge, I kind of like to hold it in place, and that tends to just keep it, I just do sort of a loop back and round on itself. And I'm just going to do some very simple stitching, because I want to kind of keep the quality of this nice sort of, it's got quite a nice pleated effect, which gives it a kind of a line as though it's water. So the question is, am I going to do it like this? Or am I going to do it, I think we'll do a little bit of going backwards and forwards. I'm going to break up the surface a little bit. So as you can see, that's a little bit of the stitching done, and I'm going to just stop there now because I think it's not very exciting to watch. I'm just going up and down really. I'll get this bit done, and I'll see you again in my studio next week, and we'll see what's going to happen with the rest of it. I've got, you know, these 2 bits to stitch the mountains and this foreground, and then we'll need to put something on it to make it, you know, sing. make it exciting, make it have a bit of interest, because this is lovely, but it's very much a background, and we'll see what's going to happen next. I love the way it's evolving so far. I love the way the stitching's pulling it together, and it's really quite exciting. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you again next time in my studio. Bye for now.
Ba ba da ba 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 ba.